I used to think their silence was a puzzle I was meant to solve, but I finally understood. There was no puzzle, just my own hope staring back at me from the void. You're waiting for someone to come back, someone who was never really here. You are haunted by the memory of a future that was never meant to happen. This ache you feel, this constant, low hum of longing that sits just beneath the surface of your days. It isn't just sadness. It isn't simply missing someone. It's the profound, systemic pain of a betrayed vulnerability. We are creatures built for connection. Our very wiring craves it. The theorist Brené Brown teaches that this need to be seen and to belong is what makes us fundamentally human. But when we are vulnerable, we operate on an unspoken contract, a deep-seated assumption that our story, our heart, will be met with a degree of care. When you offer that story to someone who isn't truly listening, the silence that comes back is more than just an absence of words. It is a form of shame. It's the crushing, invisible weight of being unseen, unheard, and ultimately unvalued. You weren't just waiting for a person to send a message. You were waiting for a reflection of yourself that you thought you saw in their eyes. A reflection that promised you were worthy of being chosen, that your love was a safe harbor. And its disappearance makes you question the harbor, the ship, and the ocean itself. This pattern, this familiar cycle of waiting for the emotionally absent, is often a haunting echo of a much older wound. The physician and author Gabor Mate suggests that our earliest relationships form the blueprint for our adult attachments, for who we learn to love and how we learn to wait for it. The person you're waiting for now becomes a stand-in, a ghost cast in a role that was written for them long ago. They are a placeholder for a primal emotional need that was never fully met. So you are not just trying to bring them back into your life. In the quiet, unconscious theater of your heart, you are trying to repair the past. You are trying to heal that childhood feeling of emotional abandonment by finally getting the person who is absent to turn around, to see you, and to choose you above all else. The pain you are feeling is a paradox, a riddle written in flesh and memory. It is not the sharp, clean pain of a scar forming over a recent wound. It is the dull, persistent, and maddening ache of a phantom limb. You feel the ghost of their weight on the other side of the bed in the morning, a depression in the mattress that is no longer there. You find yourself making 2 cups of coffee instead of 1, a reflex your hands have not yet unlearned. You walk through a store and your eyes automatically scan the aisles for something they might like, a fleeting impulse that dies just as it's born, leaving a cold residue in its wake. Your body still holds the memory of a presence that now occupies space only in the architecture of your mind. This is the unique torment of your situation. You are haunted not by a memory, but by a presence that has simply become invisible. Like an amputee who feels a searing itch in a foot that was lost years ago, you are tormented by a connection that has no physical reality anymore. Your nervous system was trained by them, conditioned by a pattern of their coming and going. It learned to anticipate the specific vibration of their text message, the sound of their key in the door, the rare but intoxicating moments of their full attention. Now, in their permanent absence, your body continues to run the program. It fires off these signals of anticipation into a void, creating a constant, low-grade state of emergency and disappointment. It's a physiological betrayal. Your own body keeps looking for them, keeps preparing for them, and every time it finds nothing, the silence feels like a fresh injury. It hurts because your biology has not yet accepted what your mind is only beginning to suspect. Nothing is there to wait for. The person you knew was a ghost long before they vanished, and you were the only one who could see them. Let's be honest with ourselves in the quiet of this moment. Let's look back at the moments that truly hooked you, the memories you have polished like precious stones and replay in your mind as proof of the connection. They were likely brief, weren't they? Intense flashes of attention in what was otherwise a vast desert of neglect. A late-night text that felt like a profound confession, its words glowing on the screen. A rare compliment that you held onto for weeks, using its warmth to survive the cold silence that followed. A single afternoon of perceived depth where you finally thought, here they are. This is the real them. I knew they were in there. You didn't fall in love with the person who consistently showed up day after day, because in truth, that person never existed. You fell in love with the evidence. You became a detective of hope, an archaeologist of affection, searching for tiny fragments to support a story you desperately needed to be true. You built a cathedral of meaning out of a few scattered stones they dropped carelessly on their way to somewhere else. That one shared glance across a room became a stained glass window. That half-forgotten promise about a future trip became the foundation stone. You took these scraps, these moments of their casual, distracted attention, and you imbued them with sacred meaning. You told yourself they were clues to a hidden, better version of them, a version only you were patient enough to uncover. But this is not an addiction to a person. It is an addiction to a story. It's a chemical attachment to the dopamine of hope, the intoxicating high of seeing a flicker of light in the darkness and believing it's the dawn. The addiction was to the narrative where your love, your unwavering patience, your loyalty would finally be the thing that saves them, that makes them stay, that proves you were right all along. You weren't addicted to them. You were addicted to the masterpiece of potential you painted over the blank canvas of their indifference. Imagine for a moment that you are sitting in a room. You have been here for a very long time. You know every crack in the ceiling, every shadow that the afternoon sun throws across the floor. You designed this room yourself. You are its sole architect. You furnished it meticulously with carefully selected, idealized memories, each one a monument to the hope you were addicted to. On the walls, you hung only the photographs where you both looked happy, the light just right, the smiles genuine. You painted the walls with their favorite color, and you placed a single, solitary chair directly facing the door, waiting. That is your post. That is your job. The air in here is thick with the silence of an unanswered phone, heavy with the ghosts of conversations you practice in your head. Hope is the only light source, and it flickers, casting long, distorted shadows that look like doubt. The most painful truth about this room is not the waiting itself. It is the realization that they didn't lock you in here. They don't even know this place exists. The door isn't locked from the outside. You could stand up and walk out at any moment. But you stay. You stay because leaving means admitting the one truth your heart cannot yet bear. The person you are waiting for was never on their way. Leaving means you would have to dismantle this sanctuary of what-ifs, this prison you have built from the very best parts of them. To leave is to concede that the waiting was in vain, and so you remain the devoted architect of your own waiting room, a space that is both a shrine and a cage. You choose to stay not because you are weak, but because this room is the last place on earth where the illusion of their return still feels possible. It is a pain you can control, a familiar ache that feels safer than the terrifying emptiness of finally letting go. The contradiction that is tearing you apart, the one that lives in the space between your ribs, is this: your internal memory of them is vibrant, detailed, and saturated with significance. It's a film that you directed yourself, playing on a constant loop inside the waiting room. In this film, you are the cinematographer, using soft focus for all the good parts. You've added a perfect soundtrack to the memory of a mundane car ride. You've used slow motion to stretch a fleeting touch into an epic gesture of affection. And you, as the editor, have meticulously cut out all the scenes of their indifference, the long stretches of silence, the unanswered texts, the nights you cried yourself to sleep. This film is your most cherished possession. It is beautiful, coherent, and full of profound meaning. But then there is the raw, unedited footage of their actual behavior. This footage is grainy and poorly lit. There is no soundtrack, only the stark, uncomfortable sound of reality. It shows the read receipt at 10:17 p.m., followed by hours of silence. It shows the canceled plans, the vague excuses, the emotional distance you could feel across a dinner table. This footage is a consistent, predictable pattern of inconsistency. You are caught in a brutal, silent war between the masterpiece you carry in your head and the cold, factual evidence of their actions. Your heart clings to the curated memory because it's beautiful, and it justifies the love you gave. It has to be real. Otherwise, the sacrifice was for nothing. But your soul is exhausted from the friction, from the constant, grating dissonance of trying to live in two realities at once. The war is between what you felt and what they did, and the battlefield is your own peace of mind. To survive the internal war between your memory and their actions, you made a very clever choice. You turned them into a mystery. You treated their mixed signals, their sudden emotional withdrawals, their carefully chosen words, and their long silences like a complex riddle. You became a cryptographer of their affection, believing that if you just found the right key, if you were just a little more patient, a little more insightful, a little more loving, you would finally unlock the treasure chest of their heart and understand everything. This intellectual pursuit gave you a sense of purpose. It felt better to be solving a difficult puzzle than to be sitting with the simple, brutal pain of neglect. Puzzle implies there is a solution. A puzzle implies that the chaos has a hidden order. It gave you a role to play other than the person who was being left behind. But their behavior was never a riddle. It was a statement. It was a clear, simple sentence written not in words, but in the plain language of their actions, repeated day after day. That sentence was, "I am not available in the way you need me to be." It was, "I cannot meet you in this place of depth you crave." It was, "I will not give you the consistency your heart requires to feel safe." You refused to read this statement because to read it meant the story was over. It's easier to believe someone is a complex mystery than to accept they are a simple story of unavailability. A mystery keeps you engaged, hopeful, and fighting. A statement is a closed door. You exhausted yourself trying to decode a message that was never encrypted. The only thing that was complex was the intricate narrative you wove to avoid the plain, painful, and deeply unsatisfying truth. The real mystery was never about them. It was about why you were willing to trade your own peace for a puzzle that had no solution. That gut-wrenching, sinking feeling that washes over you when you see they've been online, but haven't responded to the message you sent yesterday. Does it feel familiar? That sudden, cold dread in the pit of your stomach is a feeling that is older than this relationship. It is a ghost from your own history. For many who learned early on that love was something you had to perform for, this modern experience of being ghosted or ignored is so devastating because it reactivates the original pain of being emotionally invisible as a child. The silence from their phone today feels, in your nervous system, exactly like the silence you felt when you tried to show a drawing to a distracted parent, only to have them nod without looking up. It is the same hollow ache you experienced when you needed comfort but received only impatience or an empty room. Their failure to respond is not just a simple rejection from a romantic interest. Your body interprets it as a profound, existential confirmation of your oldest and deepest fear. It's a fear that was likely born in you long before you knew what to call it. I do not matter. I am not enough to be seen. My needs are an inconvenience, and my presence is easy to ignore. The pain is so intense because it's not just about them. It's about every time in your life you have felt unseen. This person, with their casual indifference, has unwittingly become the stand-in for every person who ever made you feel invisible. Their silence is a verdict. It tells the wounded part of you that what you feared all along is true. You are not overreacting. The pain is disproportionate because the trigger is so small, yet the wound it strikes is so vast. This state of endless waiting, it feels passive, as if you are a victim of time and circumstance, trapped in an emotional amber. But it is not. It is an active, demanding, all-consuming job, and it serves a powerful purpose. This waiting is a defense mechanism. It is a buffer zone you have constructed, a kind of purgatory that shields you from two things you fear far more than the waiting itself: the immense, final grief of their loss, and the terrifying, unstructured freedom of what comes next. As long as your life is organized around this vigil, you have a purpose. You are the lonely lighthouse keeper, scanning the horizon for a ship that will never return. The task is painful, but it is clear. It saves you from having to face the deafening silence that comes after you finally stop listening for their footsteps. As long as you are waiting, you don't have to ask yourself the question, who am I without this longing? What do I do with all this love, all this energy, now that its object is gone? You are hiding from your own life. The waiting is a form of holding your breath underwater. The thought of surfacing is terrifying because you've forgotten how to breathe the air of a world that doesn't revolve around them. The familiar ache of hope is a pain you have learned to manage. It is a known quantity. The grief of finality, however, is a vast, uncharted ocean, and the freedom of moving on feels like being pushed out of a plane without a parachute. So you stay in the waiting room, you keep watch at the lighthouse, not because you truly believe they are coming back, but because the alternative, the acceptance, the grief, the rebuilding, feels like an impossible task. You aren't just waiting for them. You are actively hiding from the life that is waiting for you. We can focus on their departure. We can spend months, even years, analyzing the exact moment they left, replaying the last conversation, dissecting the words they didn't say. But the ultimate betrayal, the one that truly shattered your foundation and left you adrift, was not that they left you. It was that you had already left yourself long before they were gone. The person who truly abandoned you in the most critical moments was yourself. You abandoned yourself every time you heard that small, wise voice in your gut whisper, "This isn't right." And you told it to be quiet, that you were being too sensitive or demanding. You abandoned yourself each time you accepted a breadcrumb of their attention as if it were a feast, feeling pathetically grateful for a scrap from their table when you were starving for a real connection. You abandoned yourself every time you silenced the part of you that screamed in protest, the part that was angry and hurt and knew you deserved more than this hollow echo of a relationship. You made excuses for their silence. You justified their inconsistency. You shrank your needs, making them smaller and smaller, hoping they would finally fit into the tiny space they were willing to offer you. This slow, steady erosion of self is the deepest wound. The grief that weighs so heavily on you now is not just for them. It is the grief of this self-abandonment. You are mourning the fact that when you needed a champion the most, when you needed someone to stand up and say, "No, my heart is worth more than this," you did not do it for yourself. The ultimate betrayal wasn't that they walked away from you. It was that you stood by and watched them do it, without coming to your own defense. You have imagined what it means to let go, and the image is likely a violent one. You picture yourself with a pair of scissors, severing a thick cord. You see yourself at a bridge, lighting a match, admitting a final, crushing defeat. It feels like an act of surrender because you have already surrendered so much of yourself. It feels like one more loss in a long line of losses. You think you must perform one last, brutal act to finalize the story, to declare it over. But this is a misunderstanding of what letting go truly is. It is not an act of war. It is an act of peace. It is not about them at all. Let us reframe it. See letting go as the simple, quiet, non-violent act of turning around. For months, perhaps for years, you have been standing in that room of your own making, your focus fixed entirely on their closed door. You have stared at it for so long, studying its wood grain, its cold, unmoving handle, that you have forgotten that there is an entire world behind you. Letting go is simply turning your head. It is the gentle shift of your shoulders. It is the slow, deliberate act of turning your body to face the life that has been patiently waiting behind you this whole time. It is walking back into your own home, the one you abandoned to stand vigil at their door, and finally turning on the lights. It's the quiet act of noticing the dust on your own belongings and deciding to wipe it clean. Letting go is not an admission of defeat. It is the act of coming home to yourself. It is not an act of surrender. It is the first moment of true, quiet, personal victory. The act of turning around, of coming home to yourself, is where the real work begins. Brené Brown reminds us that true belonging can never be negotiated with someone on the outside. It is not something another person can give you or take away from you. It is, instead, our ability to belong to ourselves, to stand beside ourselves with unwavering loyalty, especially when we feel abandoned and unseen. The courage you have been searching for this whole time was never about finding the strength to wait one more day or to love them harder. It was always about finding the quiet, profound strength to stand up from that chair in the waiting room, walk to the door, and lock it from the inside. It is the definitive act of choosing your own reality, with all its discomfort and uncertainty, over an exhausting and soul-crushing fantasy. It is reclaiming the room that you now realize they never truly occupied. It was your hope, your potential, and your love that filled the space all along. In the words of Gabor Mate, this wound, this hollow ache that you carry, is ultimately an invitation. It is not a void to be feared or a sign that you are irreparably broken. It is a space that is finally, mercifully, empty of their ghost. It is a space that you can now, perhaps for the very first time, begin to learn how to fill with your own presence, your own breath, your own boundaries, and your own voice. The story was never truly about whether they would come back. It was always about whether you would. It was about you finally returning to yourself and finding that you were the one you had been waiting for all along. We have a short guide on naming the ghost you've been waiting for. It won't make the pain disappear, but it will give it a name. It's free. The link is in the description. This wound is a diagnosis, not a life sentence. But the healing, that happens elsewhere. If you are ready to stop rereading the last chapter and start writing the next one, the conversation continues elsewhere.